Hey there guys, and welcome back. On this week's show, a custom case. Well, I know that we've done some custom cases on the show before, but this one's just a little bit different. It is a case for a project that we did just recently. However, it's going to combine two shows that we did quite some time ago. One being the iBox demonstration, as well as our simple lidded box build that I showed you quite a while ago on the show. Guys, this whole project starts off with some 1/2-inch plywood, but before you can get into that, you need to know how big to make the box. Well, in order to determine the interior dimensions of your case, I've taken the object that I wish to build a case for. In this case, it's our place marker chalkboards that we made not too long ago. And I've lined them all up in what I think will take up the least amount of room in a case. And what it provides me with, if I put a straight edge on either side and I take a measurement, it tells me that I need a case in this particular instance, which is 9¼ inches wide and 15¼ inches long. That is the interior dimensions. At this point, you may also want to take a height of your stack of chalkboards in this case to see how deep your box needs to be. And for me, well, we're going to go 3 inches. I think a 3-inch deep box for these will be just perfect. Well, we now have the interior dimensions of our case. However, how long do you make it? Those interior dimensions are just that. They are the interior dimensions. And what you need to keep in mind is how a finger joint goes together. And that is the fingers connect and they insert into each other by the thickness of the material. Does that make sense? So you have a 1/2-inch thick piece of ply and your other piece goes into it, and you are now effectively losing a 1/2 inch of material or length off of each piece, because each one will insert into the other by a distance of the thickness of the material. Sounds confusing, I know, but because we're using 1/2-inch ply, what we need to do is on that interior dimension, 15¼ and 9¼ we need to add 1 inch, which is 1/2 inch on either side. So our pieces will end up being 10¼ by 16¼ I had to think about that. So 10¼ by 16¼ we're going to make those pieces and cut them at 3¼ inches deep. I changed it from 3 inches. A little bit of playroom. Well, at this point in time, it's time to set up the Anchorage Jake. This video is not about setting that up. I will put a link to the setup and the demonstration of the jig down below in the description, but I'm going to set it up to do the finger joints on the pieces that I've just cut for the box. Well, if everything went well with your setup and your test cuts, you should be able to dry fit this box together just like this, and check your interior dimensions by sliding it over your assembly. And looks like we are golden. All right, so this is the finger joint aspect of this project. And now we need to get into the simple lidded box part. So what we want to do is we want to mark the inside and the top of every piece. So in order to place that mark, I'm just going to place a small little arrow at the top of each piece on the inside. So I'll know if I see that arrow, the arrow points to the top and it's the inside surface. So now that that is done, we're going to have to head over to the router table. Alright, so over here at the router table, I have a 1/4 inch double flute straight bit installed, and I have the height of the bit set to approximately half the thickness of our material, in this case 1/2 inch ply. So we need to test that first to see how close we are to half, because we need it to be pretty much right on the money. So the way that you can test that is with a scrap. You can just run it through just a couple inches, back it off, turn it around, and then do the same process. If it cuts through or leaves just a tiny little bit of material left, well, if it cuts through, it's too high. If it leaves the tiniest little sliver of material, you can raise your bit ever so slightly, and then you should be fine at that point. Well, I have set my fence so that the bit slides perfectly between our fingers here. And with the fence set in that position, for 2 of the pieces anyway, I can run my 1/4 inch dado end to end and at the top inside of our stock pieces. Now on our other pieces, we can see that if we run the exact same fence setup, which we have to, we are going to lose part of our finger here. Not our finger, but our finger joint finger. And if we lose that, it's going to put a large hole in the side of our joint. So what I want to do is some stopped dados. So I have a stop block set up on both sides, both the in-feed and the out-feed tables. And I'm going to start partway along, and then we'll reverse it very carefully, bringing it up to just inside our finger, leaving a 1/4 of an inch or half the thickness of our material on that finger. Now, I fully believe that being plywood, that it's gonna chip out on me and I'm gonna lose it anyway, but I gotta try. Well, truth be told, I did end up losing these little pieces here, but I was able to salvage them before they got sucked away by the dust collection and glue them back into place. So we saved it right there. So now I'm gonna cut the other one and then I'll come back and see you. Well, I've given all of the interior surfaces of the sides of our box a sanding, and on the outside of one piece, I have marked which side is the top. That's important because we're not going to know the difference in just a bit when we glue this all together. And that is the next step. I've cut 2 pieces of plywood, 10 1/4 inches by 16 1/4, the same exterior dimension as our box, and it's 1/2 inch thick ply. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue all these fingers together, and then I'm going to glue the top and the bottom of the box on, and that will of course form this large cube, shall we call it, even though it's not really a cube, but it's going to form this large box, and then all we can do is set it aside and let it dry up. So before you glue the top and the bottom on, just make sure that you check it to make sure that it's square. clean up the squeeze out that's on the inside of the box, and then glue the top and bottom on and clean up all the squeeze out on the exterior of your box. Okay, so our box is dry and it's time now to separate the top from the bottom. But let's head over to the bench and I'll show you what we need to do at the router table in order to do that. Well, we already have the height of our bit set over at the router table. What needs to change is the position of our fence. So let me just show you this here. This is a cross section of our box, and this is one of our 1/2 inch panels with our 1/4 inch wide dado cut in it, approximately an inch down from the top. And then of course we have another piece of ply like this. That is the, that is the top of our box. And then we have another piece down here, which is the bottom of our box. So what we need to do is we need to set up our router table or our router fence so that that 1/4 inch bit is going to cut right there. So essentially, by cutting right there where we just marked, this will separate these two pieces and then they can fit together like a lid. So let's head over to the router table and set this up. Well, do you remember that piece that we used to initially set up our bit? Well, I hope that you kept it because you're going to need it at this point in time. You can do this without it, but this is a great help as a setup block. So right now, what this represents is our side pieces, but we also have a lid on there. So right off the bat, we're going to have to adjust our fence so that it incorporates that. There we go, right there. Can you see that? It's now, let's do this. It's now lined up with this groove. But we don't need it lined up with that groove. We actually need it below that groove. So we're just going to slide our fence back so that it ever so slightly cuts through and kisses the edge here just a little inside this groove so that it'll separate the two pieces. And once we're happy with our setup there, we'll tighten down our fence and we'll just do a test cut on this piece right here just to make sure that it is in fact going to separate our sections of our box. Well, I don't know if you can see that, but that is pretty much perfect. It is separated there. I can ply that apart. I think what I want to do is I'm going to raise my bit ever so slightly just to give the lid a looser fitting. Not a lot, just a tiniest little amount. And let's try that again and see how that works out. Well, that worked really well, and in fact, it separated it perfectly. So we are now going to run through our router setup 3 sides of our box. Well, before we make the final cut to separate our pieces, I have some scrap cuts of 1/4 inch thick MDF, and I'm just going to place it in our routed slots here so that the box doesn't collapse on itself as we route through the final pass and separate the lid from the box. Now if you did everything right, your lid, there we go, should just separate there. Get a little bit of glue, but that's okay. Your lid should just separate, and now, this is our bottom, I've got it upside down. Alright, so now your lid should fit on there, just like so. Okay, it's gonna make a liar out of me. What's going on? Okay, I see what's going on. Got a little bit of squeeze out here in the corners that's preventing the box from closing. So I'm just gonna clean that up with a chisel, and then we'll test the lid. There we go, that's better. Okay, so all that's left to do now is give this thing a good sanding. We're gonna run a 1/8 inch round over all the way around the top and the bottom, and fill her up. And there you have it. A simple lidded, finger jointed box for our chalkboard placeholders. Guys, this project is not about making a case for those chalkboards. It just turned out that I had a great use for the case. As it turns out, this project is more about what you see on my program and using it for your own needs. In this instance, I absolutely love that simplified lidded box. The method of running the 1/4 inch dado around and then adjusting the fence and doing on the outside to form a lid and a base all in one shot. I love it. But I also love finger joints. And finger joints especially, for some reason, I don't know, I love the way they look in plywood. The way at the corner joint you see all those layers, and it just gives a really cool effect, and there's something about it that I just love. So up until recently, I never even gave it a second thought to combine the two, and then I thought, wait a second. If that's what I like, if I like the finger joints and I like the lidded box aspect, why not join them all together? And then I balled the whole thing up as a case for our chalkboard projects. Guys, it was a win-win-win all the way around on all fronts. The only thing I wasn't pleased about was those stop dados in the end of those fingers. Those fingers are fragile, and man, I had such a hard time getting them not to pop out, and although I was able to save 2 and glue them back together, I lost 2. So by losing 2, that provides a tiny little hole in the corner of either our lid or our base, whichever one it ended up in. A little disappointing, but you know what? That's the way the plywood crumbles, sort of thing. Guys, do not be afraid to join methods together that you see on this show. Just sometimes you have to think it through, like with those stop dados in this project. Guys, this one's been a lot of fun. I actually wanted to do this last week, but then when I checked my plywood stock, I was completely out of enough 1/2 inch to do the project, so I had to go out and buy more, hence delaying the show another week. No big deal. That's just the thing with woodworking. We're never really in a hurry. It's always, you know what, it'll get done when we get done. And the more patience that you have during a project, the better your projects are going to be. Here on the show, in a lot of cases, I'm in a very limited time frame to produce the project in order to get it out to you guys, and therefore I'm probably not as meticulous as what I could be, but you guys at home, the more patience you have, the more meticulous you can be, and the better your projects will be. So keep that in mind for your next project. Guys, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Click the bell so that you don't miss the notifications of future episodes of the show. I hope you've enjoyed this project. I hope that you're going to try it for yourself. I'm going to put the links to the other 3 shows down below. The lidded box, the finger joint demonstration, as well as the chalkboard video. Guys, honestly, this has been a great show, and I hope you're going to join me again next week. when I bring you yet another woodworking video.